Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Zachary landed at the Charlotte airport carrying not only a suitcase but also an intense mix of relief and longing. After years of completing missions, he was back. All he wanted at that moment was to hug his kids and reunite with Vanessa. The plan was simple: pick up the car, stop by the boys' favorite coffee shop, buy those cookies they loved, and finally arrive home as a surprise. At least, that's what he imagined. In recent months, communication with Vanessa and the kids had been a bit different. The messages weren't as frequent, and when they did come, they seemed empty, automatic, lacking the emotion they once had. He noticed it, felt a little anxious, but tried to convince himself it must be just the distance, the exhaustion, the heavy routine, and that in person, everything would go back to normal. After all, that's what always happened. When he was away, things got a little cold, but it only took coming back home, hugging the boys, looking into Vanessa's eyes, and everything would fall back into place. As he walked toward the baggage claim, he pulled out his phone to let them know he had arrived. As soon as he turned on the device, he noticed a single notification, a voicemail. Right away, he imagined it was some kind of greeting from the kids, one of those messages they used to record when he was away. He put on his earphones and hit play. But as soon as he heard the voice, he felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. It was Vanessa. Only it wasn't the sweet voice he knew. It was cold, dry, calculated. Her words came like stabs to the chest. She said the locks had been changed, that the kids were fine but preferred not to see him, and to make it very clear, it was over between them. No room for conversation, no margin for doubt. Direct, cruel, final. For a few seconds, he stood still, staring into nothingness, trying to process if he had heard correctly. His brain tried desperately to make sense of it all. He thought maybe it was a mistake, an impulse, a temporary crisis. It didn't make sense. They argued, like any couple, but never, not once, had she shown anything so extreme. And the kids? How could they not want to see him? It simply didn't compute. He tried calling her right away. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again. And again. Same result. He took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and while pulling his suitcase, tried calling the house phone. Call cut off. His heart raced. This couldn't be real. He grabbed the contact for his oldest son and hit call. Call rejected. He tried the youngest. Also rejected. Panic started tightening his chest. His breathing grew heavy. It felt like he was being punched over and over, without time to react. He got into the car and headed straight home. Every mile felt heavier, more suffocating. When he turned onto the street, he saw the house. It was there, just as he left it. At least, on the outside. He parked the car, got out, walked to the door, and tried turning the doorknob. Locked. He tried again, as if that would change anything. He rang the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. Absolute silence. He looked through the windows, searching for any sign. No movement. No voices. No sounds. He looked around and saw one of the neighbors inside a pickup truck parked at the corner, someone he'd known for years. He walked over, knocked on the window, which took a while to roll down. The man seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Zachary asked what was going on, if he knew anything. With some hesitation, the neighbor admitted that Vanessa had told everyone that Zachary was distant, absent, and that she was moving on with her life, raising the kids alone. And that any attempt by him to show up could be seen as an invasion. Each word hit him like a hammer to the head. It was as if pieces of his own history were being ripped away, distorted beyond recognition. He ran to the backyard, hoping the spare key they always hid was still there, behind that old board on the fence. He stuck his hand into the space, empty. She had taken it. That confirmed it wasn't an impulse, not a sudden outburst, not a misunderstanding. It was planned. It was final. It was real. He sat back in the car, threw his phone on the seat, and squeezed his eyes shut, holding back a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The man who had faced war zones, survived impossible missions, and dealt with situations most wouldn't even dare to imagine, was now there, defeated. But this wasn't a physical defeat, it was a pain no amount of military training in the world could prepare someone for. He picked up the phone again. And this time, without hesitating, he called Dylan. As soon as Dylan answered, Zachary went straight to the point, no beating around the bush, I need you. This has turned into a war. From the other end, the response came immediately, firm and unquestioning, tell me where you are. And in that exact moment, Zachary realized the life he knew simply no longer existed. The battle he was about to face would be the hardest of them all, and this time, it wasn't a military mission, it was personal. Dylan knew that if Zachary was calling him, it meant the situation had gone beyond limits. And it wasn't just any problem. It was serious, heavy, something that was out of control. As soon as they met, there was no time for small talk. Zachary told him everything, every detail. From the messages that had started to cool off in recent weeks, to arriving at the airport and receiving the cruel message saying the locks had been changed and that his kids didn't want to see him anymore. And worse, that the marriage was over. Just like that. Without explanation, without warning, without a chance for dialogue. Dylan listened to it all, trying to make sense of it alongside him. He knew Vanessa. He had spent time with her at parties, barbecues, family gatherings. None of this made sense. A sudden separation like this, without any opening for conversation, didn't seem normal. Especially considering Zachary had been away on work duty, serving his country. It was absurd to think that, out of nowhere, she simply erased him from her life and the lives of their kids. The first thought that crossed Dylan's mind was, something is very wrong with this story. A separation, no matter how difficult, doesn't happen like this. Not with someone changing locks, cutting off all contact, and turning the kids against their father. This isn't just a decision out of weariness, out of fights, or out of relationship fatigue. This carries more weight. There's more to it. That's when Dylan asked the question Zachary couldn't stop asking himself, what do you think is behind all this? But no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't find an answer. In the past few months, they had some arguments, of course. The fact that he was always away, the absences, the difficulties that military life imposes on any family, all of that weighed heavily. But he never imagined it would be enough reason for her to take such an extreme step, especially involving the kids. That's when they decided to dig deeper. They needed to understand what was really going on. If she wasn't offering an explanation, then they would go after the truth themselves. But they couldn't just start asking around. That would only make things worse, potentially leading to accusations, bigger fights, and even jeopardizing any possibility of resolving the situation in court. Dylan, who had contact with a trusted private investigator, suggested hiring his services. A guy named Alex, who had worked on dozens of similar cases. Discreet, efficient, someone who knew how to uncover what people went out of their way to hide. Zachary hesitated for a few minutes. He never imagined he'd one day need to hire someone to investigate his own wife. But looking at the reality of it, he realized he had no choice. It was either that or live in the dark, accepting a version of events that clearly wasn't complete. When they spoke with Alex, Zachary was clear, he wanted to understand what had happened. He needed to know if Vanessa was okay, where she was, how the kids were doing, and most importantly, what motivated such a radical cutoff. If she truly wanted to separate, fine, but not like this, not by ripping the kids away from him, not erasing him from the history of their family. Alex explained that before anything else, he would conduct a full sweep, checks on public databases, information on recent movements, new rental contracts, financial transactions, social media history, and even physical surveillance, if necessary. The work would be discreet, without raising suspicion. No direct approach, just gathering information. In the days that followed, while Alex began his work, Zachary was caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. He relived every recent conversation with Vanessa, trying to remember if there had been any signs he missed. Any phrase, any look, any change in behavior that could make sense now. And indeed, he started remembering. He recalled that in the last few weeks, she had been colder, responding to messages more bluntly, without the affection she used to show. Sometimes, she didn't respond at all. And the video calls that used to happen almost daily became increasingly spaced out until they completely stopped. At the time, he tried convincing himself it was just the hectic routine, the stress, the natural wear and tear. But now, looking at it all from the outside, he realized that wasn't normal. It never was. While processing all of this, he stayed at Dylan's house, who, besides opening his doors, proved to be one of the few who was truly on his side, ready to face this storm, whatever the truth behind it all might be. While Alex did his part, Zachary tried, in his own way, to seek answers. He called some mutual friends, trying to understand if anyone knew anything. But the responses were always vague, filled with silence, discomfort. Some said she seemed fine, that she was reorganizing her life, but no one went into details. Others simply avoided the topic. The feeling was that many people knew something but chose not to get involved. What hurt the most wasn't even the end of the marriage, it was the fact that he was being treated like a complete stranger by his own kids. That, more than anything, cut like a blade. Because, no matter how physically absent he might have been, he never stopped being a father. He was always present in their lives, even from afar. He always called, kept up with them, participated however he could. And now, it was as if he had never existed. As the days passed, Alex's report began to take shape. And Zachary knew that when it landed in his hands, his life could change completely. Because by that point, he had already understood one thing: this wasn't just a simple separation. It was deeper, darker. And if there was a hidden truth behind all of this, he was willing to go all the way to uncover it. When Alex finally reached out, his tone already hinted at bad news. He asked to meet in person because there was a lot to show, and it would be impossible to explain everything over the phone. That same afternoon, Zachary and Dylan were sitting in the living room, facing Alex, ready to hear it all. Alex placed a folder on the table. It was thick, heavy. He opened it, spread out some documents, printed photos, reports, and began. He said that initially, he started tracking Vanessa's movements over the past few months. He discovered that she had indeed moved out of the house they shared, but she wasn't doing it alone. There were suspicious financial movements, recent rental contracts under another address, and above all, records of trips taken on specific dates, precisely those days when she claimed to be too busy to answer calls or reply to messages. But what turned the investigation around was a simple detail: Vanessa wasn't reorganizing her life alone. In the photos, there was always the same man. Tall, well-dressed, usually driving different cars, mostly luxury ones. Most of the time, they were seen entering or leaving restaurants, malls, or hotels. There was no room for doubt about the kind of relationship they had. And that hit Zachary like a punch to the gut. The man's name? Marcus Callahan. A real estate entrepreneur. Public, well-known, seemingly successful, with an impeccable image on social media and in the local community. But as Alex made clear, image is just a facade. And when they dug deeper, what they found was simply terrifying. Marcus had an absurd history of parallel relationships. It wasn't just that he got involved with married women. It was almost a lifestyle. They found records of at least 4 recent cases, all following the same pattern. Women who, at some point, were vulnerable, going through separations, marital crises, or emotional struggles. He would appear in their lives offering everything they dreamed of hearing. Stability, affection, attention, promises of a better future, financial security, and unconditional love. He made them believe they were about to live a fairy tale. One of the stories was about Rachel, a teacher from Houston. She met Marcus at a real estate event. Within a few months, she quit everything. She resigned from her job, sold her house, and moved in with him, believing they were starting a life together. 3 months later, she discovered Marcus had another woman living in San Diego, experiencing the exact same story. Another victim was Melanie, from Orlando. A mother of 2, recently divorced, thinking she had found a wonderful man. Until the day she accidentally answered a call on his phone, and on the other end was a woman asking if he had already finalized his divorce so they could start their life together. Right then, she realized she wasn't the only one. And it got worse. Beyond the relationships, Marcus operated an extremely sophisticated financial fraud scheme. The pattern was almost always the same. After gaining the women's trust, he subtly convinced them to open joint bank accounts in international banks, typically in tax havens like the Cayman Islands, Belize, or Luxembourg, under the pretext of asset protection, dollar investments, or starting a company to ensure the couple's financial security. In practice, he used the victim's personal data to set up legal structures abroad, such as offshore companies and shell corporations. Once the company was established, he requested million-dollar loans from international banks or private credit platforms operating outside traditional regulatory systems, using false guarantees or inflating the victim's financial capacity. Many of these institutions, located in jurisdictions with low fiscal transparency, didn't require rigorous in-person validation, just digitalized documents, corporate contracts, and sworn income declarations. With this, Marcus built a robust financial profile in the women's names, often without them even realizing it. All it took was convincing them to sign a few documents under pretexts like banking regularization or tax optimization. Once the loan was approved, amounts that easily exceeded $500,000 to $2 million, depending on the victim, he quickly transferred the money to third-party accounts, distributing the funds across various digital wallets, cryptocurrencies, and other hard-to-trace assets. As soon as the money was secure and out of reach, Marcus simply disappeared from the women's lives, ended the relationship, and left them with the full debt they didn't even know existed. The victims only found out when they started receiving notifications from international banks, collection letters, or worse, when their names were added to restrictive international credit lists like World Check, along with facing account freezes and transnational lawsuits for defaulting on contracts they didn't know existed. This type of fraud is known in legal circles as international document fraud, associated with money laundering and financial fraud through falsified identity, a highly complex crime involving corporate, banking, and international criminal law. And by that point, Marcus had already left at least 3 women in a state of international insolvency, with combined losses exceeding $8 million. There, in front of all of that, it became clear that Marcus wasn't just an adulterer or an emotional manipulator. He was a high-level criminal. A financial predator disguised as Prince Charming. When Alex placed a dossier on the table with photos, WhatsApp conversations, social media screenshots, and even security camera footage showing Vanessa and Marcus entering a hotel together, Zachary felt as if his entire body lost its strength. It was a shock. A mix of anger, sadness, and disappointment. As much as, deep down, he had started to suspect something, seeing it all laid out there, materialized, tearing apart any hope that it was all just a misunderstanding, felt like getting shot. But that wasn't all. The investigations showed that Vanessa wasn't being deceived. She knew exactly what she was getting herself into. In several conversations, she herself talked about plans to move to another state with Marcus. She mentioned selling everything she owned, cutting all ties with Charlotte, and starting over, as if the life she had with Zachary and the kids was just a chapter to be forgotten. The most infuriating part was reading a message where she clearly stated that she was tired of waiting for a man who lives for work, who's never present, and deserves someone who's truly willing to be part of her life every day. As if all the years Zachary spent away, risking his life, hadn't been for that family. As if everything he did had been useless. Dylan, who was beside him, slammed the table. The indignation was so great that words failed him. It was unbelievable that someone they knew, lived with, and considered a friend, was capable of such betrayal, such coldness, such cowardice. Zachary, however, took a deep breath. The pain was immense, but something inside him began to shift. Because at that moment, he realized this wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. The marriage was already over. It was about protecting his own dignity, protecting his children, and ensuring that people like Marcus didn't destroy any more of his life. He picked up that dossier, looked intently at each photo, each document, each detail, and with a firm voice, said just one thing: now she's going to meet the other side of me. Zachary knew he couldn't act impulsively. As much as every fiber of his body screamed to confront Vanessa immediately, bang on her door, and throw all of this in her face, he took a deep breath and did what he always learned during the most critical missions of his life: control, strategy, precision. The first step was organizing all the evidence Alex provided. Photos, conversations, fraudulent contracts, suspicious financial transactions, offshore company setups using third-party documents, and all records of Marcus's parallel relationships. Each piece of information was catalogued, dated, and organized so there wouldn't be any gaps. Dylan helped build the timeline, connecting events, names of victims, and financial operations carried out. When everything was ready, Zachary called Morgan Sullivan, his lawyer, and explained everything. Morgan was shocked, not just by the magnitude of the emotional betrayal, but also by the severity of the financial crimes involved. And it was she who made the suggestion that changed the course of the entire story. She said, "Zachary, this isn't just a divorce issue anymore. This is federal crime. And very serious. It's something for the FBI." Without wasting time, Morgan made the necessary contacts. She knew an FBI agent specializing in financial crimes and international fraud, Agent Matthew Carter. They scheduled a meeting for the next morning. For hours, Zachary, Morgan, Dylan, and Alex presented the entire dossier. They detailed every suspicious transaction, the connections between the shell companies, the fraudulent loans, the misuse of victims' data, and most importantly, the money laundering through tax havens. Agent Matthew was impressed by the wealth of details. He said that Marcus was already being monitored in preliminary investigations due to similar allegations, but nothing up to that point had come with this level of concrete evidence. And the most surprising part was when he confirmed that, yes, in addition to the victims Alex identified, the FBI already had records of at least 5 similar complaints spread across other states. It was only a matter of time. The operation was authorized. And while the FBI worked on preparing the federal arrest warrant, Zachary knew there was still one pending mission: confronting Vanessa. He knew this would be one of the hardest moments. It wasn't about fighting anymore, or saving a marriage. It was about laying the raw truth on the table. She needed to see who, exactly, the man she was destroying an entire family for really was. Zachary went straight to the house where Marcus was living with Vanessa. He knocked on the door, and when she opened it, she was completely surprised. Her face changed instantly, total shock, as if she had seen a ghost. Before she could say anything, he took a deep breath and spoke firmly, "I just want you to listen to me. First, where are the kids?" She, somewhat confused, quickly replied, "They're at school." And then, frightened, she asked, "How did you find me?" "That doesn't matter, just listen," he responded, looking her in the eyes. Without giving her space to argue, he entered, placed the folder on the table, opened it, and began spreading out the photos, printouts of conversations, fraudulent contracts, bank records, GPS tracking, and images that simply destroyed any illusion she still had. Every word was a punch. He revealed who Marcus was, explained the pattern of behavior, showed the history of frauds, the women he had financially destroyed, and the fake companies set up using the victims' data. Then, he pulled out the heaviest document, proof that Marcus, in recent weeks, had already requested 2 loans using Vanessa's information at institutions in tax havens. She had no idea. Vanessa turned pale, her hands began to tremble. She tried to deny it, tried not to believe it. But the evidence was there, alive, irrefutable. When she saw images of Marcus with another woman, in the same week he told her they were looking for houses together, she broke down. She started crying, sobbing, falling into despair. She tried apologizing, tried justifying. She said she felt abandoned, fragile, needy, that she didn't realize who he really was. But Zachary cut her off immediately. He said none of that justified destroying an entire family. He told her she hadn't just betrayed a marriage, but her own history, her kids, and everything they had built together. While Vanessa tried to process it all, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Marcus. A simple, direct message, as if nothing was happening, everything's ready for the trip. I'll pick you up at 6 p.m. Zachary looked at her and, with a firm voice, said, "You're not going anywhere." Neither is he. That same afternoon, a joint operation by the FBI, in partnership with the Charlotte Police Department, was launched. Arrest and search warrants were executed at 2 offices and Marcus's house. He was detained as he was leaving a hotel accompanied by another woman. He was relaxed, smiling, with that same air of superiority, until the moment he saw the agents approaching, identifying themselves, and placing him under arrest. The handcuffs clicked shut, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Callahan lost that arrogant smile. He was immediately taken into custody, formally charged with international banking fraud, falsified identity, money laundering, organized crime, and financial fraud against institutions in U.S. and international territory. In the days that followed, the media exploded with the news. Newspapers, websites, and TV stations reported the arrest of businessman Marcus Callahan, detailing the fraud schemes in tax havens, the scams against women and investors, and the laundering of millions of dollars over the past few years. Zachary watched the reports, holding a mix of relief, sadness, and indignation. Relief for exposing who that man really was. Sadness for seeing his family destroyed. And indignation, because deep down, he knew all of this could have been avoided if Vanessa had seen it sooner. But on that day, one thing became very clear to Zachary: he lost a marriage, but he saved himself, his kids, and prevented more people from having their lives destroyed by that criminal. The divorce went through quickly. After everything came to light, there was nothing left to discuss. Vanessa, emotionally shattered, signed the papers without resistance. The loan Marcus tried to take out using her name wasn't approved in time. Thanks to Zachary's report to the FBI, the transactions were blocked before being finalized, and she narrowly escaped carrying a multi-million-dollar debt that would have ruined her life. Over time, the kids began to understand the whole truth. Slowly, they started talking to their dad again, resuming the bond that had always existed but had been distorted by lies. Zachary made sure to be present, participating in their daily lives, showing that despite everything, a father's love doesn't change. To be closer, he rented a house just a few blocks away from the family's old residence. Vanessa moved back into the house she once shared with Zachary and the kids. But now, everything was different. That woman who used to flash smiles, greet neighbors, and seem to have a perfect life, was now seen in a different light. People looked, whispered, judged. The neighbor's gaze was no longer the same, and she felt the weight of her own choices. And so, life went on. Each person on their own path, carrying the marks of what happened. Zachary, stronger and more aware of his own worth, moved forward, surrounded by his children and the people who truly mattered. Vanessa, on the other hand, learned the hardest way possible that sometimes, one wrong choice doesn't just destroy a marriage, it destroys a reputation, a history, and a part of your own soul. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.